Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth part of this Dragon Age Inquisition hair modding tutorial. In this instance in particular we are going to be doing a bit of editing for the hair. So far, to make a quick review of what we have been doing, we extracted the meshes from the game using the Dragon Age Inquisition mod maker, and after that we imported the meshes into a 3D editing program, in this case 3ds Max. Aside from that, I imported both the head, body and hair of this human female, and I also added the material using the material menu of 3ds Max, with the addition of using the settings for opacity that give you the transparency in the mesh. As you can see, the transparency lets you know that there's quite a bit of the mesh that you won't be using, like these sections here, here and here, so you can create your hair without having to worry about how it will come out, or if perhaps this strand you thought would be longer ends up being shorter or not. Anyways, I'm going to be making a few modifications. This will be a very simple editing for the mesh. I'm sorry, I will try to stop moving it as much. Okay, wait. Where are you going? Okay, there you go. I'll try to stop moving it as much, and I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to start working on some basic things. But before I get started, I would like to share with you some very life-saving tips. First and foremost, in customize preferences, you can set the rollout threshold. What does this mean? It means how many times Ctrl-Z can be applied to your mesh. You can see I have a very large number. Yes, take into account that your default settings will be much smaller, around 20 or 10 rollouts. I highly suggest that if you are prone to testing things that you would like to revert, or small movements that you would like to cancel, then you modify this. That way you can do a Ctrl-C as much as you want without fear of running out of rollouts. Okay, that's like my major tip for this. Aside from that, there are a few things when it comes to how you want to modify the hair that you should take into consideration. Here you can see the different types of selections that you have for the mesh. It can be through the vertex. You can press it here, or you can press 1 and it will show you the vertex. You can do it by the edges. If you press it, you won't see it. Yes, but if you want to see the edges, you have to press F4, and there you will have it. This part in particular is very useful if you see the texture being perhaps too stretched or modified or anything, and you just want to perhaps get a better grip of exactly how the texture is being modified. This one helps a lot with that. Aside from that, you can select by faces, and it selects only one face. You can select by polygon, it's pretty much the same as faces. I'm sure there's a difference, but I don't know enough about 3ds Max to tell you. And you can then do the element selection. This one selects the full strand instead of a part of it. So let's say you want to make a modification. There are many ways of doing this, with the selection and then rotation and such of the strands. For example, I have this strand picked, I press R and it will show me this this little wheel here that allows me to rotate it, and I can rotate it in all the axes that are available. As you can see, I don't like what I did. I press Ctrl C until everything is back in order. If you want, you can press Ctrl and select more than one strand, because perhaps you want to, I don't know, make this a fringe. It's possible. And you want to rotate it. Now, 3ds Max needs a little bit of tricking when it comes to this kind of modifications, because for example, okay, let me take off the edges. There we go. For example, I rotate this. See what happens. Okay. Do you see how the strands are rotating but not together? It's like each one is rotating on its own axis. If you want to keep them together and in the same shape as you are seeing them now, you will have to go to this part here, use pivot center, and you have to change it to the second one, that is, use selection center. This way, when you rotate something, the whole selection rotates equally. You can see. And let's say, for example, I'm modifying this, I'm rotating it, and I'm bringing it here. There, believe it or not, you already started making your mod. You can move it by pressing W, I'm sorry, this is always W en castellano, W in English. You see, you can move it on different axes. I suggest always turning to this. Don't try to grab this one because this is more free, but the thing is that you only see a partial perspective. So perhaps I'm doing this, but I don't realize that I'm moving it all over the place without being aware of it. So I suggest you only move it as far as the perspective you're using lets you see. Okay? These are the more simple ones. There's also the R. If you press R, it will allow you to scale the selection. Here you have to be careful. Take into account that here you have to also use the selection as center, and you have to be very careful because not all the strands deal very well with the whole scaling. You will notice this mostly with the texture, because I mean you can stretch it till some point where it will stop looking nice, so be careful with that. Okay, so I put it here. Now you can see that it's already looking quite different from what we started. You have to be careful because as you move from one place you are uncovering another. But anyways, this is just a few pointers for you to take into account. Very well, as I was saying, we started making a few modifications. Sorry for the small pause. And well, for the moment all we've been seeing is the tools for rotation, movement, scaling and such. There are other tools that are more useful for this kind of modifications, but a bit more complex when it comes to controlling them. That would be the soft selection. If you're going to use it, I suggest you use it mostly with the vertex and the edges selected, because soft selection is something that works in allowing you to edit with effect on the nearest vertex or edges of what you have selected. The program by default has very high numbers. Like if I use soft selection right now, for example, I'm going to pick this vertex and you see the whole head turned orange. That's because everything got selected. But to show you how it works, we're going to use the proper parameters for the dimensions that this mesh uses, which is usually 0.1 is already a stretch. 0.1, there we go. You see? Now you can see the red orange area is the area that will be most affected by whatever you decide to do, followed by the yellow green, blue, and the completely blue ones won't be affected. So with this one you can move and see that while you are moving the mesh, the modification is more user-friendly. Like, you can do a lot more with this than just moving strand for strand, and you can combine both. Take into account that if you switch to another type of selection, for example, I jump from this to element, you do that by pressing the number 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each of these selections. 1 is the vertex, 2 is the edge, 3 the face, 4 the polygon, and 5 the the element. Take into account that if you want to move a whole element while keeping the soft selection turned on, that you do by clicking here, then it will act as soft selection. You see, no? Well, what I usually do when I want to take the most advantage of all of this, yes, is when I'm in element selection, I disable the use of source selection, and I use this type of selection specifically to separate parts of the hair. Like, I think that it will help you organize more the modeling experience if you can see this hair by the parts that compone it. Like, you have the whole of this part, with this part. Oh, quick tip. Press, click, left click and drag, lets you select. Control, left click and drag, adds to the current selection. Alt, okay, wait. There, Alt removes from the selection, okay? But what I was trying to tell you is that it will help you more in the process if you learn to divide what you are having into parts. For example, I can have the ponytail for one part. Here, if you're going to be moving sections of the hair, I suggest to change this setting to this one, and that way you can input the values by hand. For example, I wanted to move on the Y axis 0.5, and now you will see that it has, okay, wait a moment, there's something that weird going on here. Okay, I'm going to exit this. There we go. Sorry, it was a problem with the settings and it has been corrected. Something that shouldn't have been, I must have done it by mistake. Anyway, as you can see, I moved the ponytail far enough away from the hair, from the rest of the head, where if I want to modify it using soft selection, I don't have to worry about this part being affected. For example, with this, I can now grab here and do this, and I get a longer ponytail that can be placed back in the head. For example, I disable use of soft selection, I enable the elements selection, and I choose my ponytail back and place it back where it was. Remember that I told you to, if you wanted, change this setting and manually insert the values by which you're moving. I moved it 0.5 values in the Y axis. I'm going to do the reverse, less 0.5, and it's going to be back in place. This that I did just now, I find it that it's most helpful because the soft selection is a really useful tool, but if you use it with the whole mesh like this, you will have selections that maybe you don't want to use. For example, I do this, and perhaps this looks nice, but I want to, I don't know, for example, this, I'm going to do this in an exaggerated way to prove my point, but it's just so you can get it. This, you see how it starts affecting the design. I made one the longer ponytail, but I don't want the back of the hair to go into the back of the body. Okay, that's why I suggest doing this, selecting without use of sub-selection and parting sections that you can identify. For example, you can do the same with the fringe. You see, you select the fringe by keeping press Ctrl. Be careful not to select anything that you don't want to, and there you go. You can separate it, you can modify specific strands and such. Okay, let me see. We're going to place this back where it was. If you move it but you don't remember how much you moved it, just do it by eye. And there we go. You see? And we extended the ponytail, and we moved the fringe, and it's looking quite different from the original one. Perhaps now I want to modify this strand so that it covers this. But I just want to use a soft selection in this strand in particular, not the whole area like it would happen with this. So here I can use this option that it's edge distance. It will show me only one vertex selected because of this, and here you put a high value like 50, and now you can see it's only doing the soft selection in the strand that you have selected. Now you can move it, rotate it, play with the scale, keep moving it. I suggest you play with these values because that's the fun part of it all. Start getting familiarized with the program and discovering things and making amazing creations. Not that this in particular is anything worth much, but well, you get my point, I think, I hope. Okay, so let's say that I'm doing this to cover this spot that's left here. Very well. And I'm going to, okay, this one I can move it to here, and I'm going to grab this point here. No, it's a bit tricky sometimes, but it's only until you start figuring out the things that you want to modify. But you see how I'm working with this? I'm moving, I'm testing. Some of it you can do it by what you want to create. I suggest nonetheless that if you have an approximate idea, then that you use references. References are amazing for this. I made the Josephine hair using her hair mesh as a complete reference, and that's how it came out so well, and how the braid that you can see in some of my mods looks like that, because I literally use it with the original braid as a reference. Okay, well, I told you it was going to be a simple thing so you could see the results, so I'm going to leave it here. Next video we will check about exporting this and placing this, and I'm creating a mod that will be later used in the game. Okay, so see you later.